According to the Incan foundation myth, at some point in the early 13th century, 4 brothers and 4 sisters emerged from a window somewhere to the southeast of here, near Lake Titicaca, and began a journey looking for a place to settle. And after quite a few adventures, and some of the brothers dying, eventually Manco Capac, the first Sapa Inca, came to what is now Cusco, and he found the convergence of 2 rivers, a place where 2 rivers met, and decided that that is where they were going to build the city. And that city would be the foundation of the Incan Empire. Cusco grew to be a bustling metropolis, the capital of the Incan Empire. But not only the capital, it was the center of the Incan Empire. And at the center of Cusco, there's a great temple, formerly known as Inti Wasi or Inti Concha, now commonly known as Qorikancha. Qorikancha was built on the spot where Manco Capac first planted his golden staff, tested the soil, found that it was good, and decided to build the city of Cusco. And it lies not only at the center of Cusco and the center of the Incan Empire, but it was believed by the Inca to be the center of the universe. It was a sacred spot not only for its role in the foundation of the Incan Empire, but it was also believed to be the pivotal point around which the sphere of the heavens rotated. And it is at this most important place that a great temple was erected by Pachacuti. After returning from his conquests in the north, Pachacutec, used all the wealth that he had gained to build a massive temple at the site of Inti Wasi. As you can see, it's excellent stonework. The finest stones were used only. More of those mysterious nubs. Not sure what's going on there. Here are some of the original walls of the Temple of the Sun that were built under Pachacutec. As you can see, there's a church on top of it now. Here you can see some waterworks. Unclear if those are original or a modern reconstruction. It's noteworthy that the wall is round, which is very rare in Incan architecture, and usually only in solar temples. Here we have this courtyard, which was used for ceremonial events and was a courtyard in the time of the Incas. The entire city of Cusco is shaped like a puma, and it had two legs, and this was the gap between the two legs in that shape. There would have been several temples here. One dedicated to the sun, and within it there would have been a great golden sculpture of the sun called Qorikancha. It would have been a big round disc made of gold with rays coming out of the sides, and it was oriented so that when the sun rose in the east, it would hit the Qorikancha and reflect, causing a great radiance. They said that it was comparable to the actual sun. And on certain Inca holidays, the Sapa Inca, Pachacuti first, would conduct special ceremonies there. They would make offerings to the sun god, Inti. And the way that they would do this is they would set up a large offering of flammable material. And then the Sapa Inca would take a concave mirror and, holding it in his hands with the beams of light shining perfectly through the windows on that day, bouncing off the Qorikancha, and then out of the mirror in the Inca's hands, it would concentrate the light, kind of like a magnifying glass, and that would set fire to the offerings. Now, much of the site has been destroyed, but besides the solar temple, there were also other temples. Much of the monastery that is built here was damaged in a series of earthquakes, especially in, I think, the 1950s. But as you can see, the original Inca structure is perfectly intact. A great deal of expertise was used in its construction. It is known that besides the Temple of the Sun, there was also a temple to the moon, the sun's wife. There was a temple for the rainbows, a temple for thunder and lightning, a temple for Venus, and a temple for the stars. Which temples these are specifically, nobody knows. But these are some of those temples. There you can see a little bit of earthquake damage. As the Temple of the Sun was the most sacred, it was also considered the most idolatrous by the Catholics, and thus it was destroyed. Here, behind glass, we have an Inca ceremonial niche, and it's a very important one. The Spaniards thought that this was a throne for the Inca, and that these holes, I don't know if you can see them with the reflection, that these holes were all filled with emeralds and jewels, and that the Sapa Inca would sit here. However, it's thought now that this was actually a place where there was some sort of icon, probably not the Qorikancha, but something else, and that these holes probably held some very fine fabric, or perhaps a door that was used to hide whatever was in there. When the Spanish converted this space into a monastery, they completely destroyed the niche by cutting it in half, and all of this was dismantled, removed, and turned into an arch for a door, and covered in stucco and decorated like this. because it was a church. It was only after the great earthquake of 1950 that they were putting this monastery back together and noticed much of the original Incan stonework and restored it to what it is now. And you can see that there's a lot of damage to it. Whenever the Spanish wanted to install a door or something, they would just hack away at it. Here we have some ruins with channels for liquid, perhaps some joinery or liquid, and also the remains of another ceremonial niche. Places where something could have been tied. Holes and channels. And this could very well be the remains of the Temple of the Sun. Here we have a model of what it may have looked like. All the different temples together. Now, this may be just a structural component, but there's also a very good chance that it is a very, very important stone. At the top of Machu Picchu, there's a similar stone called the Hitching Post of the Sun. And on certain days of the year, on solstices, for instance, the sun goes perfectly over it in such a way that it casts no shadows. Now, it is known that there were several of these in the Incan Empire, although most were destroyed. And if this is the one from Qorikancha in the center of the Incan Empire, then this stone would have represented the exact center of the world. The fact that it has 4 sides is very significant because not only the directions, but the Incan Empire was split into 4 states, and the name for the Incan Empire translates to the 4 lands. And so it would have been oriented in such a way that one side of it faced to each Incan state. One of the later Incas who was doing religious reform instituted a map of lines radiating out from the center of Qorikancha all throughout the Incan Empire. And it is along those lines that the Incan roads were built, and that certain wakas, or temples, altars, sacred places, existed. And the ones that were on the lines were considered to be correct, and the ones that were not on those lines were considered to be false idols and were destroyed. Now, I said that this place had several names. First, Inti Concha, or Intiwasi, which means the house of the sun god Inti. And later, after it was rebuilt by Pachacutec, he changed the name to Qorikancha, the house of gold, because it was filled with gold. It was filled with golden icons and artifacts, and there was just a band of gold going around the walls of one of the temples. And in one of these temples, he constructed a bench of gold. He was the 8th Sapa Inca. Well, his father, Qorikoncha, was still alive when he did all this, but there were 7 dead ones who had been mummified, and he moved all of their mummies into one of these buildings and sat them on the golden bench. They would have been sitting cross-legged, and for special occasions he would consult with them, because it was thought in the Incan belief system that when the Sapa Inca died, that they were more or less still alive. They still maintained all of their property. They still had courts. They would be taken out on special festive days and be part of sacred rituals, and they could be consulted for advice by the living Sapa Inca. Nobody's really sure what happened to the mummies. They were last seen in the basement of a hospital in Lima in the 1800s, and from there they disappeared. And as for the gold, when the Spanish came, in the midst of the Incan Civil War, which Atahualpa had just won, they captured him and held him for ransom. A king's ransom in gold was delivered to the room he was in, enough to fill the room with gold. And pretty much all of the gold from Qorikancha was lost to the Spanish in that moment, who then proceeded to melt it down and ship it to Spain. Here you have a map of all of the seques. The seques are the lines which radiate out from Qorikancha and on which all the wakas were placed. There was something like 328 that were known to the Spanish and that are recorded, but likely there were 365, and they think that each waka corresponded to one day of the year, and that on that day there would be a festival at that waka. You can see that there were many wakas on each line. Some had only 3, some had 15. A little bit about Incan astronomy. This is the night sky as seen from Cusco in the summer months, and you can see the Milky Way there. Now, the Incas had constellations, but not the same way that we did. They saw images here. So there was, this one was a baby llama. You can see its head there. The images are the dark part. So you can see the neck of the llama, the eyes. Here it has a baby llama cub, and it's being chased by a fox. There is also a toad and a partridge, and something over here, the serpent. And these corresponded to Incan deities. So it's kind of inverted from a constellation as we know it. And they believed that these were the gods of those animals. So this was the llama god in charge of all the llamas, and that was the serpent god in charge of all the serpents, and so on. They thought that each animal had a corresponding god that lived in the sky. They believed that the Milky Way was called the Great River. This is a sculpture that's based on a drawing that was made in the 1500s, and it is said to illustrate the cult of Qorikancha, but also it could be sort of a map of Inca cosmology. It shows many important elements such as the sun, the moon, Venus, perhaps Mars, the morning star, some constellations, and various other things that are related to the cosmos and the functioning of the universe and the cycles of agriculture and astronomy. There's a temple there, and you can see that there used to be another one here, and it was incorporated into this wall. And it looks like it wasn't moved because the stonework is very, very precise and fine, and looks like it's all in place. A niche, and another one of those posts, and another. Doesn't look like it's in its original position though. You can see there's all kinds of rocks just scattered around here that are the leftovers and remains from the destroyed temples. All around the center of Cusco there's a bunch of these ancient walls. Many of them used to be walls of palaces of the Sapa Inca. Each one built rather large and magnificent palace for himself. You can see that some of the doors were reused.